The Galactic Council chamber sat in complete silence. All sounds had stopped. The representatives from 37 different species stared at the screen that showed one simple fact. Humanity was gone. The species called humans had vanished from the galaxy 500 years ago. Their home planet Earth was destroyed in the Cascade Wars. No human had been found alive since that day. No human ship had been detected. No human colony had sent a message. Humanity was extinct, and the galaxy had moved on without them. Counselor Vex stood at the center of the chamber and repeated the information one more time. The search teams had completed their full investigation. They had checked every human colony. They had studied every known human settlement. They had searched through every record and database. The conclusion was final. There were no humans left in the entire galaxy. The species that had once walked among them was now just a memory in history books. High above the council chamber, in the observation deck of Horizon Station, Commander Lucas Harrison stared out at the stars. He was 42 years old, strong and intelligent. His eyes were blue like the old Earth sky. His dark hair showed the first hints of gray. But these things did not matter now. What mattered was that everyone in the galaxy believed he did not exist. Lucas had known this moment was coming. The Council had been searching for human survivors for 200 years. He had watched them give up one by one. The Zorthan Empire had stopped looking 70 years ago. The Kelp Collective had declared humans extinct 100 years before that. Now, finally, the last of the official search teams had completed their final check. Humanity was officially dead, but Lucas Harrison was alive. He turned away from the window and walked through the quiet corridors of the station. Every person he passed was human. The pilots who flew the ships were human. The engineers who fixed the systems were human. The doctors, the cooks, the soldiers, the teachers, all of them were human. And all of them lived in secret while the galaxy believed they were gone. 500 years ago, when the Cascade Wars had started, humanity's leaders had made a choice. They understood that they could not win against the combined power of the alien species. The Zorthan Empire alone was 10 times more powerful than all of humanity together. The Kelp Collective had more ships, more weapons, and more soldiers. Humanity had only one advantage. They could think in ways that the aliens could not. They could be creative in ways that no other species could match. So the leaders had chosen to hide deep beneath the surface of a small planet called Kepler-4 42b. Hidden so far away that almost no star charts included it, humanity had built a sanctuary. Over 500 years, they had grown stronger. Scientists had worked to improve the human body. Engineers had created weapons that could match any technology in the galaxy. Doctors had found ways to make humans live longer and think faster. Teachers had passed down the values that made humans different from all other species. But the most important thing that they had preserved was simple. They had kept their belief that protecting the innocent was more important than anything else. They had kept their faith that kindness and courage were strength, not weakness. They had taught their children that a human was measured not by power, but by the choice to do what was right, even when it was hard. Lucas received a message on an encrypted system that only a handful of people in the galaxy knew about. The message came from the Council of Elders, the oldest and wisest humans, the ones who had made the decision to hide 500 years ago. The message contained only 10 words. The time has come. We go back. We protect the weak. 3 days later, Lucas called for an emergency meeting in the main command center. Captain Margaret Torres arrived first. She was 38 years old and had spent her entire life training for this moment. Her parents had told her the story when she was young. Her grandparents had trained her. Her own children knew what was coming. Dr. Nathan Cooper came next. He was a medical specialist who had studied every alien species in the galaxy. He knew their biology, their weaknesses, their strengths. He had dedicated his life to understanding how to help them, even though they did not know he existed. Then came Captain Samuel Price, the best ship commander that humanity had produced. He had never flown a real mission. He had only trained in simulations. But in those simulations, he had never lost a battle. His mind worked like a machine. He saw 3 moves ahead of his enemies before they even made the first move. The Tavri children, Lucas said to them, 3,000 of them, held in the Zorthan slave camps on Station Vex 4. They were taken from their home world 6 months ago. They are being prepared for a lifetime of labor. No one in the galaxy has the power to save them. No one thinks it is possible. Margaret leaned forward. But we know it is possible. Yes, Lucas said. We know it is possible. The Tavri were a small species, only 1 meter tall, with blue skin and 3 fingers on each hand. They were peaceful. They had never fought a war. They had never built weapons. But they had one gift that made them valuable to the Zorthan Empire. They could create neural interfaces, devices that could connect the mind to a machine. The Zorthan wanted to use these children to build weapons that were controlled by thought alone. The fortress has 22 defense stations, Samuel said, studying the data. The walls are reinforced with neutronium alloy. The internal security system is connected to the Zorthan command network. There are 5,000 Zorthan soldiers on the station, and we have 12 ships. Can we do it? Nathan asked. Samuel looked up from the data. Yes, but people will die. Some of us will not come home. The room went quiet. Every human understood this. They had hidden for 500 years, but they had done more than just become strong. They had become willing to die for people they had never met. This was what separated humans from the other species in the galaxy. Other species fought for profit, for power, for control. Humans fought for something different. Humans fought for the right to be human. My grandfather told me something when I was a child, Margaret said. He said that humans were not extinct because we could not win wars. We were extinct because we had chosen to hide until we could win them the right way, until we could save people instead of just destroy them. Lucas nodded. Prepare the crews. We launch in 3 weeks. We go to save 3,000 children who will never names. We go to show the galaxy that humans are alive. And we go to remind ourselves why we hid in the first place. Because we can do more than survive. We can protect. We can save. We can be the species that the galaxy forgot. As the meeting ended and the 3 captains left the room, Lucas returned to the observation deck. He looked out at the stars again. In 3 weeks, the galaxy would know that humans were alive. There would be no more hiding. There would be no more waiting in the darkness. There would only be the truth. Humans had returned. And they had returned not to take what belonged to others, but to save what belonged to no one. The time of darkness had ended. The time of purpose had begun. The Zorthan fortress hung in the blackness of space like a massive metal structure built for war and conquest. It was shaped like a pyramid with sharp edges pointing outward in all directions. Weapon stations covered every surface. Gun turrets rotated slowly, always watching, always ready. Patrol ships moved in perfect formation around the fortress, searching for any sign of danger. The Zorthan Empire had built this fortress 500 years ago, right after they had destroyed Earth. They had never faced a real threat since that day. They had never needed to. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood in the command center of the human fleet and studied the fortress with careful eyes. He had trained for this moment his entire life. His grandfather had fought in the Cascade Wars. His father had spent his whole life planning the return. Now Kevin would execute the plan. He had 6 days to figure out how to break into the strongest fortress in this part of the galaxy. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships. They were small compared to Zorthan vessels, but they were faster and smarter. Each ship had been built in secret, hidden deep beneath Kepler 442b. The engineers had spent centuries perfecting them. The weapons on these ships could punch through Zorthan shields. The engines could outrun Zorthan fighters. The computer systems could think faster than any Zorthan machine. But Kevin knew that numbers were against them. The Zorthan fortress had 5,000 soldiers. The human fleet had only 2,000 fighters total. The fortress had enough firepower to destroy the entire human fleet in less than an hour. Kevin had studied the numbers 1,000 times. They did not work. Humanity should lose, unless they did something different. Kevin called his senior commanders into the war room. There was Captain Sarah Murphy, the best fighter pilot that humanity had ever produced. She had never flown in a real battle, but in the training simulations, she could outfly any enemy. She could take her small fighter and destroy 5 enemy ships before they could even get a lock on her position. Her hands moved across the controls like she was playing music. Next came engineer Marcus Johnson. He was 53 years old and had worked on the hidden human technology his entire career. He understood every system on every human ship. More importantly, he had something that most Zorthan engineers did not have. He had learned to think like a human. He could see solutions that came from creativity, not just from logic. Then came Dr. Rachel Adams. She was the psychological specialist for the mission. She understood how the Zorthan mind worked. She knew what they feared, what they wanted, and how they made decisions. She had spent years studying their culture from the hidden human database. She would help plan not just how to fight, but how to win without starting a war. The Zorthan commander is named General Thorak, Rachel said, bringing up his image on the screen. He has fought in 43 battles. He has never lost. He believes that strength is everything. Weakness is death. Mercy is stupidity. He will fight until he has no other choice. Kevin nodded slowly. Then we give him a choice he cannot refuse. We make him understand that mercy is the only option left. Sarah leaned forward. You want to beat him without killing him? I want to beat him without destroying his entire fortress, Kevin said. The Devry children are inside. We need to save them, not create a war that destroys everything. Marcus pulled up the fortress schematics. The fortress has one weakness: the communication system. It is not just technology. The Zorthan soldiers are connected to each other through a telepathic network. They share thoughts, share information, share commands. It is what makes them powerful. So we cut the network, Rachel said. We disable it temporarily, Marcus corrected. Long enough to confuse them. Long enough to save the children. Kevin studied the plan. It was simple, which made it beautiful. While Sarah's fighters attacked from the outside, creating chaos and confusion, Marcus would lead a team of human hackers into the fortress computer systems. They would disable the telepathic network for exactly 90 seconds. 90 seconds was all they needed. In 90 seconds, Dr. Nathan Cooper would get to the detention blocks where the Devry children were held. In 90 seconds, his medical teams would be ready to move them. In 90 seconds, the children would be transferred to human ships. The rest would depend on whether the Zorthan commander chose to fight or to let them go. The human fleet moved into position 3 million kilometers from the fortress. They hung in the darkness, waiting. Samuel Price, who commanded the lead ship, sent out a message to the Zorthan fortress. The message was simple and direct. We have come to rescue the Devry children. You have 1 hour to release them. If you refuse, we will come inside and take them. The response came immediately. General Thorak sent back a message filled with anger and insult. He told them that humanity was extinct. He told them that they were insects who should not even be challenging the Zorthan Empire. He told them that his forces would destroy them in minutes. He ordered his entire fleet to launch and attack the human ships. Sarah Murphy smiled as she climbed into her fighter. This was it. This was the moment that 500 years of training had prepared her for. She felt the engine power up beneath her. She felt the weapon systems activate. She understood, in that moment, why humans were different from other species. Other species fought because they thought it would bring them power or control or profit. Humans fought because it was the right thing to do. The first squadron of Zorthan fighters launched from the fortress. There were 300 of them. They came toward the human fleet like a storm of metal and fire. Sarah took her position at the point of the attack. When the Zorthan fighters came within range, she did something that no one in the galaxy had ever done before. She fought them and won, not because she was stronger or had better weapons, but because she could think faster. She could change direction faster. She could predict what they would do before they did it. Behind her, Kevin watched the numbers. 15 Zorthan fighters destroyed. 30, 50. The Zorthan ships kept coming, but they were falling faster than they could be replaced. And on the fortress, something was happening. Marcus Johnson and his team had broken through the outer defense systems. They were inside the fortress computer now. They could feel the Zorthan telepathic network, the invisible connection that linked every soldier to every other soldier. Marcus prepared the disruptor. He would send a pulse through the system. For exactly 90 seconds, that network would shut down. The Zorthan soldiers would be confused, separated, unable to communicate with each other. In 90 seconds, Dr. Nathan Cooper could move 3,000 Tavri children to safety. Marcus looked at the countdown timer. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Now. He sent the pulse. The effect was immediate. The Zorthan formation fell apart. Fighters that had been coordinating perfectly suddenly lost all connection. Ships that had been working together moved in random directions. On the fortress itself, soldiers stood confused, unable to hear the commands that had linked them together. And in the detention blocks, Dr. Nathan Cooper moved through the corridors with his team. The security doors that had been locked opened to electronic override. The Tavri children, who had been held in darkness for months, suddenly saw light and hope. Cooper picked up the smallest child in his arms. He had spent his entire life learning about their biology, learning how to help them. Now he would keep them alive. As the 90 seconds ticked down to 0, the Zorthan communication system came back online. The telepathic network reconnected. General Thorax suddenly realized what had happened. The human ships were moving away from the fortress. The Tavri children were gone. The humans had come into his fortress and taken what they wanted. He could chase them. He could fight. He could pour his entire military at them and destroy them all. But he looked at the human fighters that surrounded his position. He looked at Sarah Murphy's ship hanging in space, ready to strike. And he made a choice. He stood down his forces. The human fleet moved away from the fortress, carrying 3,000 Tavri children to freedom. Behind them, the Zorthan fortress remained intact. No one had died. No one had been destroyed. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and they had done it not as conquerors, but as rescuers, as protectors, as something the galaxy had forgotten could exist. In the corridors of the human ships, 3,000 children breathed fresh air for the first time in months. And on the fortress, General Thoreg looked out at the stars and knew that everything had changed. The message spread through the Galactic Council like a shockwave. Humans were alive. Not just alive, but strong enough to break into a Zorthan fortress and steal 3,000 slaves right out of it. The human ships had disappeared into space after the rescue, leaving no trail, no location, nothing to track. They had appeared from nowhere and vanished back into nothing. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 12 hours after the rescue. Representatives from every major civilization crowded into the chamber. They shouted over each other, demanding answers. How was this possible? How had humans hidden for 500 years? How had they built technology that could stand against the Zorthan Empire? Most importantly, what did they want? Counselor Vex stood at the center of the chaos and tried to restore order. He banged his fist on the table. The noise stopped for a moment, but the fear remained. The fear that something they thought was gone had returned. The fear that they did not understand what they were facing. General Tharek of the Zorthan Empire made a statement that shocked everyone. He said that the humans had entered his fortress and disabled his communication network. He said that they could have destroyed him, destroyed everything, but they had not. They had simply taken the Tavri children and left. He told the council that he had made a choice not to pursue them. He had chosen to let them go. Many of the council members did not believe him. A Zorthan general chose to let an enemy escape. This went against everything they knew about Zorthan culture. Zorthan valued strength and conquest. They did not value mercy or restraint. Yet Tharek stood firm in his statement. He had let the humans go. Captain Margaret Torres received a request to speak before the Galactic Council. The message came through the secure channels that the humans had built over 500 years. It asked her to come alone and explain who humans were and what they wanted. It was a risk. Going to the council chamber meant revealing the human location. It meant putting herself in danger from dozens of different species who had different reasons to hate or fear. Humanity. Margaret accepted without hesitation. She arrived at the council chamber in a small ship that had been designed to be completely untraceable. She stepped out of the ship alone, wearing simple clothing, carrying no weapons. She was tall and thin, with dark hair and serious eyes. She walked into the council chamber and stood in the center of the room while thousands of alien eyes stared at her. "I am Captain Margaret Torres," she said. "I am human. My species has been hidden for 500 years. We are here now because we believe that the universe is better when those who suffer are protected. The Tavri children were suffering. We brought them freedom." The council erupted in questions. Where had humanity hidden? How many humans existed? Why had they stayed hidden? Would they attack the Zorthan Empire? Would they try to take over other worlds? Margaret did not answer each question. Instead, she told them a story. She told them about Earth, the human homeworld, 500 years ago. She told them about a time when humans had fought each other over small things. They had fought over land, over power, over money, over religion. They had killed each other by the millions. They had destroyed their own environment. They had come close to destroying themselves completely. And then, Margaret said, we stopped. We realized that destroying each other was not strength. We realized that building something together was better than tearing things apart. We learned that the measure of a civilization was not how much power it had, but how well it protected the weak. How well it took care of those who could not take care of themselves. When the Cascade Wars began, she continued, we understood that we could not win a war against the rest of the galaxy. We were outnumbered. We were outgunned. We could have fought until we were all dead. That is what strength looks like to some species. But we chose something different. We chose to hide. We chose to grow. We chose to become the people we needed to be before we came back. A representative from the Kelp Collective stood up. You say you value protection, but you broke into a Zorthan fortress. You disabled their systems. That is an act of war. We disabled their communication systems for 90 seconds, Margaret said. We did not destroy their weapons. We did not kill their soldiers. We did not even destroy their property. We simply opened doors and took people who were being held as slaves. The chamber went quiet. For the first time, the council members began to understand what humans actually were. They were not conquerors. They were not looking for power. They had a different kind of strength. A strength that came from knowing what was right and being willing to risk everything to do it. Over the next 3 hours, Margaret told them more stories. She told them about human history, about human values, about human dreams. She explained why humans had chosen to hide instead of fight to the death. She explained that every human understood they might die tomorrow, and that was why they chose to spend today helping others instead of trying to gain power. The Kelp collective representative stood again. He was a being made of crystalline structures that moved like water. His name was Thrask, and he had built the Kelp collective into one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. He looked at Margaret with something that might have been respect or might have been cold calculation. "You claim that strength is not power," Thrask said. "But you came to my fortress with weapons. You disabled my systems. These are acts of power." "Yes," Margaret said. "We have power, but we chose what to do with it. We used it to protect the weak. That is the difference. We have the power to destroy you all, but we will not use it that way. That is what makes us human." Thrask looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat down. Something had shifted in his thinking. The idea that humans had returned, not to take power, but to use power to help others, was new to him. It was a concept that his crystalline mind had to turn over and examine from every angle. The council voted that night. They voted on whether to recognize humanity as an official member species of the Galactic Council. The vote was not unanimous. The Kelp collective abstained. Several smaller species voted against it, fearing that humanity represented a threat to their power, but the majority voted yes. Humanity was officially recognized. Humans had the right to travel the galaxy. Humans could speak in the council. Humans could negotiate with other species as equals. As Margaret left the council chamber, she understood what had just happened. It was not a military victory. It was not a conquest. It was something more important. It was a change of thought. The galaxy had just accepted that a different kind of strength existed. A strength that came not from weapons or power, but from courage and compassion and a willingness to sacrifice for others. That night, as Margaret returned to the human fleet, she sent a message to Commander Lucas Harrison. The message was simple. "They are listening. The galaxy is listening to what we have to say." In the command center of the human fleet, Lucas Harrison received the message and smiled. The hard part was over. Now came the work of actually being what they had claimed to be. Now they had to prove that human strength was real, that it was lasting, that it could change the galaxy the way they said it could. The greatest challenge had not been the rescue. It had been showing the galaxy that humans were alive. Everything that came next would be harder. Everything that came next would require them to live up to the promise that they had made. But humans had hidden for 500 years to prepare for this moment. They were ready. 6 weeks after Margaret Torres spoke before the Galactic Council, humanity was no longer a secret. Every species in the galaxy now knew that humans existed. Every government had official requests pending with the human leadership. Every military commander was trying to figure out how to deal with this new factor in galactic politics. The quiet return of humanity had created waves that were still spreading across the galaxy. The first request came from the Meridian Union. They were a smaller civilization that had been pushed around by larger powers for 100 years. The Kelp Collective had taken most of their trade routes. The Zorthan Empire had claimed many of their colonies. The Meridian had no military powerful enough to fight back. But now that humans existed, They thought maybe things could change. They sent a delegation to speak with Marcus Johnson, who had been appointed as the human ambassador to the Union. "We want protection," the Meridian representative said. He was a tall being made of pure energy, contained within a suit of protective material. "The Kelp Collective is moving closer to our worlds. We believe they will attack within the year. We need your help." Marcus listened to their request. He understood what they really wanted. They wanted humans to fight the Kelp Collective for them. They wanted humans to be their military force. They wanted human strength to solve their problems. "We can help," Marcus said carefully, "but not the way you might think. We can teach your people to fight. We can help you build better weapons. We can show you how to defend yourselves. But we will not fight for you. You must fight for yourselves." The Meridian representative looked disappointed, but he understood. The humans were not what other species had expected. They did not want to control other worlds. They did not want to build an empire. They wanted others to become strong enough to protect themselves. But not every species welcomed human involvement. The Kelp Collective became worried as they watched humanity make agreements with smaller civilizations. They saw the pattern. Humans were making themselves necessary. Humans were becoming important. And the more important humans became, the less important the Kelp Collective would be. Thrask, the Kelp Collective leader, called an emergency meeting with his military commanders. He told them that humanity was a threat to everything the Kelp Collective had built. He said that humans could not be allowed to spread their influence across the galaxy. He ordered them to prepare for war. But Thrask did something unusual. He did not order an immediate attack. Instead, he ordered a propaganda campaign. He wanted the galaxy to turn against humans. He wanted every other civilization to understand that humans were dangerous. He wanted fear. The campaign began with careful lies. Kelp Collective media stations reported that humans had enslaved entire populations. They reported that humans had stolen technology from other species. They reported that humans had secretly attacked Kelp Collective outposts. None of it was true, but the lies spread quickly. When the lies reached Commander Lucas Harrison, he made a decision. He would not fight the Kelp Collective with weapons. He would fight them with truth. He gathered records and data and information. He created a database of everything that humans had done since they returned. Every rescue, every negotiation, every agreement, every time they had chosen not to fight when they could have. Then he sent it all to every species in the galaxy. The effect was powerful. Species that had been afraid of humans now understood what they really were. More importantly, species that had been listening to the Kelp Collective propaganda now saw the truth. The Kelp Collective was trying to hide something. The Kelp Collective was afraid. Marcus Johnson received a personal message from Thrask. The Kelp Collective leader wanted to meet alone with a human representative. He wanted to negotiate. He was willing to discuss peace if humans would agree to limit their expansion. This time, Marcus made a different choice. This time, he would go himself. He took a small ship and traveled to the Kelp Collective capital world. When he arrived, Thrask was waiting in a chamber designed to appear neutral and open. Marcus entered with no weapons, no backup, no way to defend himself if things went wrong. Thrask looked at him for a long moment. The crystalline being seemed to shift colors, moving from blue to green to a deep red. Finally, Thrask spoke. "Why did you come?" Thrask asked. "You knew this could be a trap. You knew I wanted to destroy you. Why would you walk into danger?" Marcus sat down across from the Kelp leader. "Because talking is better than fighting," Marcus said simply. "Because if we fight, your people die. My people die. The galaxy suffers. But if we talk, maybe we can find a way to coexist." Thrask laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "You are foolish," the Kelp leader said. That is what makes you dangerous. You are willing to die for things that do not matter. You are willing to sacrifice for strangers. This is not strength. This is stupidity. Maybe, Marcus said. But let me ask you something. Your civilization has existed for 10,000 years. In all that time, how much better has the galaxy become? How many people live happy lives? How many children grow up without fear? Thrask did not answer. My people hid for 500 years, Marcus continued. We spent that time preparing. But we did not prepare just to fight. We prepared to build something better. We prepared to show the galaxy that there is another way to live. A way where power is used to protect instead of control. A way where strength comes from helping others instead of hurting them. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus and Thrask talked. They discussed history, philosophy, culture, and values. They discussed what it meant to build a civilization that could last for 10,000 years. They discussed what kind of legacy the Kelp Collective wanted to leave. By the end of the conversation, Thrask had not become human. He was still a being of crystal and calculation. But he had understood something new. He understood that humans represented a genuine alternative to the way that most civilizations operated. He understood that humans were not trying to take power from the Kelp Collective. They were trying to change what power meant. Thrask agreed to a trade agreement. It was limited and careful, but it was real. The Kelp Collective would not attack humans. Humans would not interfere with Kelp operations. And slowly, over time, they would learn to work together. News of the agreement spread quickly through the galaxy. Species that had been afraid of war between the two greatest powers began to relax. More trade agreements followed. More alliances formed. The Meridian Union became strong enough to protect themselves. The free colonies of the Outer Rim began to thrive. The galaxy was changing. On a small world called Kepler 442b, Commander Lucas Harrison received the reports and understood what was happening. Humanity was no longer just returning to the galaxy. Humanity was transforming it. Not through conquest, but through example. Not through force, but through choice. The Council of Elders gathered in the deep chambers beneath Kepler 442b. They were old, many of them 200 years old or more. They had waited their entire lives for this moment. They had hidden, planned, and prepared. Now they watched as their children and grandchildren built something new in the galaxy. The eldest human. A woman named Catherine, who was 230 years old, looked at Lucas with tired but proud eyes. She had been present when the decision to hide was made 500 years ago. She had lived through the entire exile. We did it, she said simply. We came back. We did more than come back, Lucas said. We came back and showed them that there was another way. That is the real victory. That night, on 100 different worlds, humans worked alongside other species. They taught and learned. They built things together. They showed the galaxy that beings who were different could work together if they chose compassion over fear. The age of human hiding had ended. The age of human purpose had begun. 1 year after humanity had returned to the galaxy, the Galactic Council held a formal ceremony to officially recognize humans as full members. The ceremony took place on a neutral space station that orbited an empty star. No species could claim it as their own. No government had control over it. It was chosen specifically because every species needed to travel equally to reach it. The leaders of every major civilization arrived over a period of 3 weeks. The Zorthan General Tharok came with a small military guard. The Kelp leader Thrask came with his crystalline advisors. Representatives from the Meridian Union arrived with gifts. The energy beings, the machine intelligences, the silicon-based life forms, the carbon-based creatures. All of them gathered in the same space to witness history. Commander Lucas Harrison stood at the center of the assembly hall and waited for the ceremony to begin. He was no longer a secret. His face was known across the galaxy. Children from 100 different species knew his name. He had become a symbol of something new in galactic politics. He represented the idea that a civilization could be strong without being cruel. That a species could have power without using it to dominate others. The council leader, an ancient being named Vex, who had lived for 300 years, stood to begin the ceremony. Vex had been the one who had declared humanity extinct 1 year ago. Now he would be the one to recognize them as full members. 1 year ago, Vex began. I announced to this council that humanity was extinct, that the human species had vanished from the galaxy 500 years ago. I was wrong. Humanity had not vanished. They had hidden. They had grown in secret. They had prepared themselves. And when the time was right, they returned to us. The assembly hall went quiet. Every eye was on Vex, waiting to hear what he would say next. The humans have shown us that there is another way to be powerful. A way that does not depend on weapons or military might. A way that depends on something deeper. They have shown us that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. From helping those who need help. From choosing to be better than our circumstances force us to be. Vex raised his arms. I present to this council the human civilization. I ask that they be granted full membership, full rights, and full representation. I ask that we commit to building a future alongside them. A future that is better than what came before. The vote took only minutes. Every species, except the abstaining voices, agreed. Humanity was now officially part of the galactic community. The ceremony ended with all the leaders standing together. A symbolic gesture that the galaxy was united in a new way. But the real work was just beginning. Over the following months and years, humans spread throughout the galaxy. Teachers went to schools and taught the next generation about human values. Engineers worked with other species to build better technology that was designed to help people instead of just make weapons. Doctors and healers worked in clinics on 1,000 different worlds. Humans became known not for their military strength, but for their willingness to work hard and help others. Captain Margaret Torres took on the role of leading a permanent human embassy on the Meridian Union homeworld. She worked to strengthen the relationship between humans and the Meridian. She helped them build schools, hospitals, and universities. She trained their military commanders in human fighting techniques that emphasized defense over offense. She became more than an ambassador. She became a symbol of friendship. Dr. Nathan Cooper established the first human medical research center on a world that had been devastated by disease. He brought together scientists from 10 different species. Together, they worked to cure diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries. Nathan did not do the work to gain power or control. He did it because it was right. Because there were people suffering, and they had the knowledge to help. Marcus Johnson and Thrask developed an unexpected friendship. They met regularly to discuss the philosophy of civilization building. Marcus brought human texts about history and culture. Thrask shared the ancient records of the Kelp Collective. They did not always agree, but they respected each other's thinking. And slowly, the Kelp Collective began to change. They became less focused on profit and control. They became more interested in building partnerships with other species. But not everything was perfect. There were still conflicts. There were still species that did not trust humans. There were still worlds where poverty and suffering existed. There were still people who wanted to fight instead of cooperate. Humans did not solve all the problems of the galaxy. They were not that powerful. But they proved that it was possible to try. That it was possible to care about strangers. That it was possible to build something together. On Kepler 442b, a remarkable event happened. The first child born to human parents on an alien world took her first breath. Her name was Sophia, and her mother was human, but her father was from the Meridian species. Sophia had skin that showed both her human and Meridian heritage. She represented something new, a future where different species could work together so well that they could even create families together. As Sophia grew, she attended schools where the teachers were from 5 different species. She learned languages that humans had spent centuries studying. She learned that there was no one way to be intelligent, no one way to be strong, no one way to be good. She represented the future that humans had fought to create. The Tavri children, the ones who had been rescued from the Zorthan slave camp, grew up in freedom. They attended universities. They built lives. They had families. They created neural interfaces, not as slaves forced to work, but as artists and scientists creating beauty and knowledge. They remembered the humans who had risked everything to save them. And they shared that story with their own children. General Thorak of the Zorthan Empire received a message from Commander Lucas Harrison on the 5th anniversary of humanity's return. The message asked if Thorak would consider a joint military exercise with human forces. The goal would not be to practice war, but to practice how to defend against threats together. How to cooperate instead of compete. Thorak accepted. The exercise brought Zorthan and human soldiers together for the first time in a peaceful way. And something unexpected happened. The Zorthan soldiers saw that human soldiers were not invincible. They could be defeated in training exercises. But what the Zorthan also saw was that human soldiers did not enjoy winning. They did not celebrate when an opponent fell. They helped each other up. They cheered the Zorthan soldiers for learning quickly. They treated combat as a chance to learn, not a chance to dominate. This simple act of respect changed something in the Zorthan military culture. Young Zorthan officers began to study human tactics, not because they wanted to copy them, but because they wanted to understand how a species could be so strong while caring so much about others. In the council chamber, where humanity had once been declared extinct, new debates began. The debates were no longer about whether humans should be allowed to exist in the galaxy. The debates were about what kind of future they could build together. How could a galaxy of different species, with different values and different ways of seeing the world, work together to make life better for everyone? Commander Lucas Harrison stood once again in the observation deck of Horizon Station, looking out at the stars. But this time, he was not looking at empty space. He was looking at ships of every design, from every species, moving in coordinated patterns. They were not fighting. They were building. They were transporting resources, sharing knowledge, moving people who wanted to help others to places where they were needed. Margaret Torres joined him, standing beside him in silence for a moment. "We did it," Margaret said finally. "We came back. We showed them that another way was possible. We changed the galaxy." Lucas shook his head. "No," he said. "We did not change the galaxy. The galaxy changed itself. We just showed them that they could. We proved that it was possible to be strong without being cruel, to have power without using it to dominate. The rest was up to them. And they chose well," Margaret said, looking at the ships moving in perfect coordination. "They did," Lucas agreed. "They chose to build instead of destroy. They chose to help instead of hurt. They chose to be more than their circumstances forced them to be. That is what makes it real. That is what will make it last." As they stood together, watching the new galaxy being born from the old one, Lucas thought about the humans who had hidden for 500 years. He thought about their sacrifice, their patience, their faith that someday the galaxy would be ready for change. That someday, a different kind of strength would matter. They had been right. And now, the future belonged to all of them. To the humans and the aliens and the beings of energy and the silicon-based intelligences. To everyone who had chosen to believe that the galaxy could be better. That they could be better. The age of extinction had ended. The age of creation had begun.